Curb-Stomp Battles, when used right, can amplify any action story. For those who don't know what a Curb-Stomp Battle is, it's the name of a trope for battles that are laughably one-sided. I'm sure you've seen these somewhere or another. One of the earliest examples I ever ran into was what Goku did quite a few times in Dragon Ball Z. And in the world of professional wrestling, this is often a way to get over someone as being strong, by having them effortlessly defeat jobbers. We call these squash matches there. While establishing strength is nice and all, you can do so much more with this if you use your head. This scenario can stir up all kinds of feelings and reactions, create fascinating character arcs, and deepen conflict. But don't just take my word for it. I have some cool examples and lessons that'll get your brain cooking. Let's start with One Punch Man, which is a series built around Curb-Stomp Battles. However, for case study number 1, we won't be focusing on the title character Saitama. Instead, let's turn our attention to Mumen Rider vs Deep Sea King. For those not in the know, this is Mumen Rider. He's just a regular guy on a bike. No magic, no muscle, just a dude. Rank-wise, he's Class C, the bottom rung in the Hero Association. On the other hand, Deep Sea King is a demon-level monster capable of destroying a city all on his own. When all the other heroes fail to stop Deep Sea King, it falls on Mumen Rider to defend the civilians. He knows he's out of his league, but he steps up anyway, demonstrating the first thing Curb-Stomp Battles can enable: heroic last stands. This is a killer way to make your audience feel and root for a character. When it comes to this kind of storytelling, it's usually a good call to save Curb-Stomp Battles for the supporting characters, cause, let's be real, they're more likely to bite the dust. But don't sweat this too much. Main characters can still rock this gig without kicking the bucket. We'll dig into that in case study 3. No matter what though, if you're penning these tales, it can add some serious oomph if the character knows they're about to take a hit but decide to throw down anyway. Whatever you do, understand this. What really hits home is when these characters endure some serious pain for something they hold dearer than their own hides. When it comes to tugging heartstrings and getting folks hooked, yeah, the struggle plays a part, but what really takes it up a notch is when they're driven by a noble goal. The noble goal itself doesn't need to be something huge like protecting civilians or so on. To show what I mean, let's peek at the world of professional wrestling, when Heath Slater went after Brock Lesnar. At this time, Heath Slater wasn't signed to either WWE brand since nobody wanted him, so he had no job. In kayfabe, he had no job. He was so desperate to gain work that he went after Brock Lesnar. This is Brock Lesnar. I could flash all kinds of tropes and stats and details on the screen, but sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. Heath, who was a weak, ineffectual villain, challenged Lesnar while knowing he could be destroyed. By itself, this is a firm stand. What made it heroic is why he took this stand. He had kids that depended on him. The noble goal doesn't require the betterment of society. It's just a matter of showing the capability to prioritize something beyond one's own comfort. The key word here being prioritize. Heroism isn't sacrifice. To quote heroes, legends, champions, why heroism matters, an individual achieves that exalted status of heroism by refusal, under any and all circumstances, to surrender his/her most prized values, standing for them even, when necessary, to the death. To simplify, if you value something, it isn't a sacrifice to give your life to it, because you consider it more important than your life. This is what it means to serve something bigger than oneself. And that's what these moments are all about. These actions are the manifestation of what someone values most. In the case of Mumen Rider vs Deep Sea King, Mumen Rider's desire to help others with what little he can, even at the expense of his own life, is what is manifested. And you can manifest your inner hero by pressing the like button and helping me. Seriously though, if this video has provided you value so far, I'd appreciate it if you could support this channel's growth. Anyway, let's not forget our primal desire to witness those baddies get a taste of their own medicine. And that leads us to the flip side of the coin, Curb-Stomp Battles that give the heroes a major upper hand. This brings us to case study number 2, the showdown between Saitama and Deep Sea King. This example started with what I've already mentioned. Deep Sea King destroyed all these characters, including the most sympathetic ones, and was threatening civilians, Deep Sea King had done all he could to generate heat, the wrestling term for hatred. What generates sympathy and what generates hatred are closely linked, but there's a core difference. Sympathy comes from suffering caused by impersonal forces. For instance, it's totally possible to feel a pang of sadness for poor Heath, while also finding it hard to muster much anger towards Brock for what he does to Heath, especially after Brock gave him not one, but 2 warnings, and even offered him an out. Now, if we really wanted to stoke some serious hatred, we could have had Brock be the reason Heath lost his job and a bunch of other awful stuff. Anger is generated when the audience has someone to blame for the suffering. With Deep Sea King, he made a conscious decision to unleash havoc and inflict pain on innocent folks, and that's why Saitama vs. Deep Sea King hits the bullseye despite it ending in a single punch. As for why you'd write this, it gives the viewer the power fantasy of standing up to these figures we've all encountered at some time or another in life, and seeing them get absolutely wrecked. To note, this appeals to a more primitive side we all have that I'm not exactly the fondest of in real world context. Still, it's a useful tool for us writers. Besides, while fiction can impact people, fiction and reality are 2 separate things. Now, while I'm sure you could wrap your head around building up hatred to the villain, there's a caveat I must mention. I do not recommend telling this story from the hero's POV. A character who does this that we're immersed into can come off as a bully or a sadist or various other things that you likely don't want. This can sabotage the audience perception of them, which kills the power fantasy. Thus, when writing hero Curb-Stomps the villain scenarios, it's often best to tell a story from either the victim or the villain's POV. For the victim, since we're immersed in their experience, we get to happily cheer along the hero as well, experiencing the same hope and joy as the villain getting their comeuppance. When it's the villain, we get to know who they are, why they've done what they've done to earn the ire, and best of all, we get to enjoy watching them go from thinking they're in charge to realizing they have no chance whatsoever. In fact, this is one of the many reasons for putting ourselves in the heads of unsympathetic characters. Lastly, you can use the one-sidedness to spark some character development. Case number 3, Zoro vs. Mihawk, is a perfect example of this. Zoro's goal is to become the world's greatest swordsman, a title that can only be claimed by defeating the current holder of the title, Dracule Mihawk. The two encounter one another for the first time early in the series, and Zoro challenges him. Mihawk crushes him with a single knife. The lesson? Zoro has been, at best, a big fish in a small pond, and if he wants that title, he has much more work to do. This approach can help make all kinds of points with decisive defeats, and like a dragon, Kiryu outclassing Ichiban helps to get across the lesson that he needs to get his anger under control, because there's people brute strength won't work against. In Fairy Tail, Guild Arts makes a point of showcasing how overwhelmingly powerful he is to Natsu, to make a point that, sometimes, you need to know when to run away. There's all kinds of lessons one can learn from defeat if they can survive it. So, if you have a lesson you need the protagonist to learn, consider having them so utterly outmatched that they must rework how they approach everything. Of course, Curb-Stomp Battles aren't all you can do in fiction, nor are they all I know about when it comes to fight scenes. The longer, more theatrical ones are equally valid. In fact, I've already made a video to help you structure one if you're interested. So, want to check out what I have to offer? Simply give it a click and continue your development as a writer.